Now, a power cut at the ANC's gala dinner disrupted President Cyril Ramaphosa's address to guests who were in attendance. The power outage occurred at about 9 p.m. while Ramaphosa was addressing guests at a gala dinner meant to raise funds as part of the ANC's 110th year anniversary celebrations at the Ranch Hotel in Polokwane, Limpopo. Now, the event used as a fundraising initiative ahead of the party's January 8th statement, which takes place later this morning. Joining us now to discuss expectations around the statement and the impact of the release of Part 1 of the State Capture Report and recent damage caused to 2 national key points is political analyst Dumisani Tembe. Dumisani, good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. Let us just start off with what happened in Parliament, that fire that took place in Parliament, and the reports that we've actually received from them. What do you think about that?
Well, good morning, and good morning to your viewers as well. I think my approach is simple when it comes to the devastation of the infrastructure that we saw in Parliament. If you look at most of the countries that have gone through a post-colonial experience, it turns out that the government that took over from the colonial government are actually unable to maintain the infrastructure. So this is not necessarily unique to this country. If you go to Mozambique, if you go to Maputo, there's so much devastation on the infrastructure. If you go to Angola, in Rwanda, so it's quite a general thing. I think what makes the South African experience very suspicious is that the political tensions are very acute in this country, and therefore when Parliament and the Constitutional Court are subjected to what is seen as sabotage, suspicions begin to arise. But in general, post-colonial governments in Africa, they battle to maintain infrastructure.
Now let's then move over to the State Capture Report, that first part that has been handed to President Cyril Ramaphosa. What is your reaction to what we've heard so far within that report and the people that are actually implicated?
It's a very interesting report with a few limitations. I think limitation number one for me is the assumption, the terms of reference of the State Capture Commission created an impression that the state capture phenomenon in South Africa is something akin to 9 years, like it has a start and an end date, and it can only be associated with the former President Jacob Zuma. And I think for me that's a serious limitation, because a state capture as a phenomenon is ongoing. As we speak right now, someone somewhere is capturing the state. The core capture of the state in this country, it started during Codesa when they included the property clause in the Constitution, which was meant to curtail the capabilities of a liberation government after 94 to redistribute and restore land restoration, for example. So I think it's quite, it's quite unfortunate that a narrative has been generated that says the state capture in South Africa has a start and an end date, which is very wrong, because state capture in a capitalist country like this one, it is ongoing. The second thing for me, I think the ANC has simply outsourced its own internal disciplinary processes into the State Capture Commission. The bulk of the people that are mentioned in the state capture are actually ANC people. So if the ANC was a very strong political party organizationally, they should have dealt with this thing within their own ranks through their own disciplinary processes. So for me, society has paid a heavy due for the inefficiencies of internal governance of the ANC. The third part for me, which may be the last one for this point, is that at the end of the day, once in the country you have too many commissions, it means governance processes and systems are very weak, or those agencies that are supposed to drive governance issues are weak. But in this case, the worth of this commission, it will depend on the ability and capacity of the National Prosecuting Authority to investigate and prosecute those that are mentioned in the state capture adversely. But then who runs the state institution, once again, is the ruling party. So ultimately, I'm not sure what will happen or if this has been a great exercise, given the limitations of the NPA and the limitations of the ruling party to uphold principles of good governance and prosecuting and jailing those that are found to have stolen public funds.
Now that we've moved on from those two, the big focus today, of course, Dumisani, is the issue of the Jan 8 statement. But before we get to what we could possibly expect today, what do you make of the happenings in the past days in Polokwane against, or what seems to be against, President Cyril Ramaphosa?
Look, at some point of my short life, I was a conspiracy theorist. So I can tell you that there is an element of sabotage against the president. But what is surprising also is that he has a minister of intelligence who should have picked up lots of these things that are happening, in Polokwane. But in any event, this January 8th statement, it has two faults. I think number one, the dominant faction led by Cyril Ramaphosa wants to flex its muscle. So perhaps for them, this is good because they now know to what extent is their own internal opposition is going to go to destabilize, let's say, Cyril Ramaphosa's quest to serve a second term as the president of the ANC. So it's a test case. So this is when the different factions in the ANC are going to stand up and weigh the strength of one another. So for their own internal political battles, this was expected, but it has also given them a sense as to what extent will their own internal opposition go to deal or to derail Ramaphosa's attempt to serve a second term.
Now, Dumisani, you've just spoken around the issue of factions. So are we then going to perhaps once again hear from the president of the ANC about how united the ANC is? I mean, we heard him yesterday already talking about that the ANC is not dying. But are we expecting to hear once again about this united ANC when the factions are clearly visible?
That's a necessary rhetoric for a leader of any political party to talk about unity. It may not mean that the unity exists within the ANC. It might mean that he needs that unity to exist for him to function in the political party. So the rhetoric of unity is going to talk about that without its existence. But then, each and every political party, organization, and churches, wherever a bunch of people are gathered together, you are likely to find factions within that. So the existence of factions in the ANC is not necessarily bad in itself. The only bad about it is that it's not a thoughtful issue. It is not a policy thinking issue. They try to sabotage each other, but they are so blind that in their quest of sabotaging each other, they all sabotage the very same vehicle called the ANC that they need to access and sustain themselves into power. So they kill the organization in their quest of destroying each other. And I think for me, that is where the horrible part is. But the factions in the ANC, they need an acute political leadership and management to guide them to use these energies that they have against each other for the betterment of the party, whilst contesting one another for leadership positions. So the faction only needs proper leadership and management.
Dumisani, now the issue, of course, comes around with Jan 8. We saw, as we mentioned earlier, the happenings within this particular couple of days leading up to today. Do you then think that we could expect some peace at this statement today after what you've just said, that there definitely is an element of sabotage?
Look, anything is possible. I don't have my bones now to predict But look, anything is possible. I think there's some serious ground, anti-Ramaphosa ground forces in the festivities of January 8 statement. So anything is likely to happen today. But I think if the ANC was wise enough, especially the leadership, the occurrences of the last day or so should have put them on a high alert to do everything to make sure that things go smoothly today. And we must remember that the January 8th statement is actually not the statement of President Ramaphosa. It's the statement of the National Executive Committee of the ANC, which in essence the whole organization needs to hear and apply.
So what are you then hoping to hear, Dumisani, from this Jan 8 statement today?
You are driving me to say something I didn't want. Nothing much. I'm not sure if I have any expectations, because if you look at the leadership of the ANC, the ruling leadership of the ANC, I am not convinced that it has demonstrated the ability and capacity to lead with a sense of urgency in recent times. In recent times, we have been a society that has been besieged with socio-economic crisis. You have seen, the devastation of COVID-19. You saw last year around July when people went on a rampage from KZN to Gauteng. The ANC itself, it lost metros. Parliament is burning today. The state capture report is up with devastating, evidences. And yet, I have not seen the leadership of the ANC acting with urgency, both in the ANC and at the state level. So despite all these crises that have been happening in the last year or so, I think the ANC leadership within itself and as a ruling party, as a government of the day, it has just been business as usual. So I'm not convinced that there's anything that is going to do today that it is going to demonstrate that it has grown to appreciate that we are living in a crisis moment, and therefore leadership needs to rise and lead with that consciousness of a society in crisis and apply the necessary agency measures to deal with the crisis. So from where I'm sitting, it's going to be business as usual today.
Dumisani Tembe, thank you so much for your time this morning. Dumisani Tembe is a political analyst, just really giving us his analysis as to what we could possibly find or get today from the January 8th statement. He's saying nothing much, and also mentioning that, as this January 8th statement builds up, or the time builds up, we then have to have a look that the ANC leadership really needs to have a good look at and be on high alert following all the happenings that took place leading up to today.